Right, I've been working on this archive again for around 3 years now. There was about a 20-year gap from when I originally worked on it in the mid to late 1990s with my great friend and co-conspirator in all things Eric, the absolutely wonderful Bill Griffiths. Bill should have been here doing this today instead of me. I'm going to shamelessly quote from what I read at Robert's celebratory 3-day colloquium for Eric in November 2015 and remind everyone of the odd 30-year correspondence between Jeff Nuttall and Eric for its sheer enjoyment and intellectual intensity, and to say to anyone working on virtually anything in and around this area, have a look at this wonderful archive. You will be richly rewarded. Towards the end of last year, I had to look out some of the Ginsberg and Burroughs correspondence with Eric, together with some photographs. And I can tell you that seeing these three amazing minds talking with each other was quite something. I would also recommend that if you haven't done so, take a look at the Bunting correspondence. His letters make excellent, if rather sad, reading. And he's one of the very few people who could tell Eric off when he was having a row with someone who was actually on the same side as him. There's the pair of you. It's bloody silly. That was with Stuart Montgomery in the 70s to do with one of the many rows at the Poetry Society, but they were on the same side. I sometimes wonder what the archive people thought when I first turned up to reacquaint myself with Eric's archive. I suspect they wondered what had hit them. I also suspect they still do. This following paragraph was written when I foolishly thought we would be in the council room for this event. But although it doesn't fit now, we're here, I still want to read it. For those of us with long memories and the years to go with them, the last time we were in this room, i.e. the council room, for Eric was the 19th of November 1994 for the launch of Peter John and Yasmin Skelt's Festschrift for Eric's 70th birthday, alive in parts of this century. The idea for this was born one wet night in a pub in Kentish Town on the 2nd of February 1994, when I asked John Whiting who best to approach to do a birthday book for Eric. Watching Eric that evening, immensely enjoying himself as he greeted and spoke to each of his guests, except me, of course, as I was now part of the enemy, was rather like watching a bride greeting the guests at her wedding reception. I started on the archive by completing the listing of the tape cassettes and doing the reel-to-reels. Bill had already done about 500 cassettes, but there were still around 300 waiting, and along with the non-music reel-to-reels, there are about 70 of these, and were quite a challenge, especially as I'd never seen a reel-to-reel before. They had to be described and listed before the even more lengthy digitisation process to save them could begin. This is, I think, ongoing, but over 400 cassettes listed by Bill were digitised last year, and the reels, which I did in November 2016, were digitised in February this year. My 300-odd cassettes are, I think, still queuing. The reels include several large conferences, such as 7 reels on the Poets of the Americas Conference in 1975, 8 reels of a 1965 Berkeley Poetry Conference, 5 more reels of a 1973 Michigan Conference, and about 8 reels of a 1973 Kent State Conference, and 11 reels of a Buffalo Festival of the Arts, which appears to have run from 1966 to 68. Hopefully these reels are still in good condition, as there's some really good stuff here. This is one man's audio collection, nearly 900 tapes and 70 reels, ranging from the early 1960s through to the early mid-1990s. What can I say about Eric? He was angry, pugnacious, aggressive, willful, belligerent, wayward, restless, did not suffer falls. He was innovative, beautiful. I do have an odd taste in beauty. Excitable, brilliant, charismatic, hospitable, mercurial, courageous, radical, passionate, vulnerable, and insecure. He was undoubtedly the most tremendous whirlwind of a force of nature. People loved him, hated him, feared him even, but no one was ever neutral. He inspired his students, and from all over the archive, I can see evidence from so many of them who wanted to remain in touch with this man wherever they went, and also that it would have been a full-time job for him to have done so. There are some of us around still who had the privilege of being with Eric when he soared high on some topic or other which he had alighted on, taking us to places, people and things we might never otherwise have thought of visiting. Afterwards, quite often leaving many of us thinking, blimey, what happened there? There's a handwritten note, 4th of March 1987, in one of the art subject boxes, probably written for the opening of an exhibition, Mottram's Mates, at the gallery by the park, run by Robert Bank. I quote, "It is difficult to know what a significant number of British artists would have done without Eric Mottram. The job he did was to reassure everyone that the job they were doing was worth doing." This quote, while aimed at the artists, equally applies to the poets and, of course, to the students who passed through his classes, both here and in the States. Working to finish this archive, begun by Bill Griffiths, has sharply reinforced in me many things about Eric, not least how he simply worked and worked and worked, all the time. He never stopped. I don't think he could watch a film or read a book without making notes on it or writing a criticism. Neither could he read an article in a newspaper or magazine without copious underlining, sidelining annotations. The sheer energy of this man, which bounds throughout his archive, is absolutely phenomenal. Working with this material again reminded me of what it was like knowing Eric. You never quite knew what you were going to find when you took a lid off a box. Apart from the tape cassettes and reels, the other major project has been around 40 boxes of what was originally labelled as notes and newspaper cuttings, covering various subjects which interested Eric. Like a lot of things in this archive, these didn't always quite turn out to be what they said they were. And in fact, They contained correspondence, books, pamphlets, and enormous quantities of notes, criticisms, and essays, some 30 and 50 pages long in Eric's minute handwriting, as well as, of course, hundreds of newspaper and magazine cuttings. Among the numerous essay criticisms are 17 pages on the metallic necessity of the New American, Culture and Technology in America, 1850 to 1900. 17 pages on Darwin, Marx, Freud and Fraser, Method as Permissive Alibi, November 72. An early 60s 23-page essay on Kenneth Burke's A Grammar of Motives. 16 pages on Norman O'Brown's Life Against Death from the early 70s. 26 pages on Félix Guattari and Gilles Deleuze. This was worked over a period of time and there's many editions. 36 pages on Virilio and Lothringer's Pure War, and 38 pages on Michel Foucault from the late 1980s, to name but a tiny few. I've just picked out a few things from the subject boxes in the archive. From technology, there's 3 folders on cars and cars in films, their history, manufacture, impact on life and landscape. This from a man who couldn't drive, sent off for a provisional licence in 1990, then never opened the envelope when it arrived. A man who was interested in computers and what impact they made and would make on working and social life, yet was afraid of his own PC. From film, TV and photography, a cutting from the Radio Times, 15 Feb 1981, on the winner of the substantial Arvin Foundation poetry competition. There's a note by Eric. They had 23,000 entries, and they picked him. This was Andrew Motion. From Social Sciences, an article from the New Statesman, 16 September 66, by Malcolm Muggeridge, heavily sidelined, underlined, annotated by Eric. His intense dislike for this man shines through. In Travel and Culture, there's a vast map of the whole of the US, with numerous cities circled and highlighted by Eric, from north to south and west to east. This is the map he got for his first ever trip to the US, funded by the American Embassy in 1960. I can't tell you how much excitement and anticipation comes through this map. In this same section, there's a guide to the Mesa Verde, and tucked in between the pages, there's a small and very beautiful black and white feather. And further along in the guide, there are some very delicate dried grasses. Finding the feather and the pressed grasses, and there's something similar in one of his notebooks, and more grasses, flowers and tree bark in other places, was not only unexpected, but shows a poignant and touching side to Eric, words not normally associated with him. Also in this section was the completely unexpected find of a set of 12 colourful Japanese matchboxes. I hasten to say, for any archivist present, they were without their matches, together with a small bamboo whisk and a bamboo-like stirrer, both connected with the Japanese tea ceremony, complete with a sealed tin of Japanese green tea. I've got out some of these things for the exhibition, as well as things from Ginsberg, Burroughs, Bunting, McSweeney, Benveniste, Pierre Joris, Howard Barker and Jeff Nuttall, together with various photographs. This is a tiny, tiny snapshot, from the archive. I could easily have chosen the same number of completely different people over and over again. Please, if you can, go and see this exhibition, and let's have a wonderful day to celebrate the writer, critic, editor, teacher and poet, and cult figure, how he would claim to hate that last description, the most amazing man that was Eric Mottram. Finally, I hear the sighs of relief going around. I'm going to read something I first read at Robert's colloquium. It's from the last of the notebooks, and is part of the last poem Eric ever wrote, and very probably the last thing he ever wrote. It's dated Friday the 13th of January, 1995, and timed, the only thing I've ever found which had a time on it, 12:50 a.m. The final 4 to 5 pages of this notebook are very muddled. They go backwards and forwards in time, out of sequence, and Eric's handwriting, always difficult, seems to have deteriorated, and I simply haven't been able to make out some of the words. And because of working on other parts of the archive, I haven't done any more work on it since November 2015. However, I think what I have managed to transcribe so far gives the flavour of some of Eric's big themes, broad landscapes, water, birds, etc. The rest of this notebook is blank. From all these years, what gifts have you brought to this table? Hard evenness, awaiting plates, timid words unexceptional to fight the food or people, parched word, spillage from exquisite crystal glasses, an inheritance, soft light hardens eating weapons. Did you bring power, sailed from stone palaces on seas, shores, tower steps, sweated labour, forced into rock? Wrapped in your traveller cloak, ragged edge from trails, bare ground gained by compass alone, nights under suns, days under stars. You whose inverted wings for lift-off, broken chains dangle in high cold air, heavy words light in gravity's air at last. Unrepentant wanderer, bring to this table your covered prizes, outlines under shot silk, slow furled wings. Thank you.